Hi, dear listeners, and welcome back to Blush and Bloom, the podcast where we talk about women's health, self care, and everything in between. I'm your host, Gigi, founder of Asale, your space for cycle aware and preventive care. I'm really glad you're here with me on this journey to unpack women's health and highlight the incredible things being built in this space. So let's get into today's episode. All right. Thank you so much, Ananya, for joining me on the podcast. It's really great to have you here. So for those meeting you for the first time, how would you introduce yourself?
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you all. I'm Ananya. I am a computer science graduate by education. I studied at Princeton, both computer science and cognitive science. But since my teens, I've also been a menstrual health activist, raising awareness about periods and against the stigma that surrounds them. And that work now led to my current startup, which is called HealCycle. It is a hormonal mental health app, and it is specifically designed to support women who are struggling with premenstrual mood disorders. So you would have definitely heard of PMS, but the more severe, or even I sometimes call it the evil cousin of PMS, is PMDD, or premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And this affects about 1 in 20 women. The numbers could even be higher because our research is quite preliminary. So we are specifically helping women who struggle with bad PMS and PMDD, and that is our starting point with the app HealCycle. And there are other conditions that we will grow to support. But essentially, that's what my work is all about.
All right, this is pretty exciting stuff. So let's say someone who doesn't even know what PMS is or PMDD is, like, how would you explain both? And I like that you explain PMDD as the evil cousin. So, like, please, could you explain what both of them are?
Sure. So PMS stands for premenstrual syndrome. And some people get confused by that terminology because premenstrual doesn't mean that before the age of menstruation. It rather refers to the time of the cycle. So our menstrual cycle has 4 different phases. And the premenstrual phase, as the name suggests, is the luteal phase, which comes right before the actual bleeding days. And this is the phase where there are a lot of hormonal fluctuations. So our progesterone levels rise, and then both estrogen and progesterone levels fall. And this sort of change in our hormonal fluctuations leads to a lot of different symptoms, which could be mood related. Sometimes it's like physical things like headaches or breast tenderness and so on. So there's both physical symptoms that come along with it and the mental side. Now, PMS is a cluster of actually 150 different symptoms, which is insane. And that's why it's called a syndrome, because it's not like a defined disease. And it's also a big spectrum. Like for some women, it's very mild and you don't really notice it. And for others, it can be really, really serious. And so people also do differentiate, and maybe the biological mechanism for PMS and PMDD could be slightly different. Like we're still figuring out the science behind it in terms of the research. But PMDD is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So as I said, it's like 10 times as worse. And a lot of times, even if it doesn't come with those physical symptoms, there are physical symptoms, like there could be fatigue, migraines, or brain fog, things like that do happen. But then there are a lot of mental health symptoms, right? So there's like anxiety, and you suddenly are way more emotionally sensitive, depressive symptoms. Even in the most extreme cases, it can lead to suicidal ideation. So these like thoughts of self-harm. So it gets really bad. And a lot of times, because in pop culture, usually people have only heard of the word PMS. So even women don't know what is normal versus like when it is extreme enough that you need to seek support, and not everyone is going through that same thing. So I think that's how I would describe and differentiate between the two. And obviously there is a lot more behind it, but that's the introductory version.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's very insightful because I didn't know that much about PMDD prior to this call. So this is really good that we are getting to talk about this. Okay. So let's talk a bit more about you. So you studied computer science and cognitive science, which is super cool. And how have you been able to bring all these things together to be able to do the work that you're doing?
Of course. So I think the passion for this area or women's health in general definitely comes from my background, as I told you, leading a social initiative first in my teenage years. And then there's actually also a TED talk that I gave about that work, which is called A Campaign for Period Positivity. So it was just a message sharing that, menstruation is a completely normal biological process and it has been stigmatized and made a taboo in so many different cultures in different ways. And it really shouldn't be. So that was the main point. And I also spoke about other things. So do go and check that out. But essentially, that was the beginning. But then I think learning about computer science and also the cognitive science part, which made me more interested in like psychology and how the brain works and all of that fits together in this really interesting way because HealCycle is an app-based solution. Instead of just cycle tracking, what we really emphasize is symptom tracking because even to get diagnosed or manage something like PMDD, what you need is not just whether or not you're experiencing the symptom, but usually a gynecologist or a therapist needs a severity scale also. Like if you're above a certain threshold, then you basically are qualified to get diagnosed officially, which like maybe you are still facing pretty bad symptoms, but it doesn't fall into like a PMDD, which is also fine because we don't give you the app itself is not a diagnostic tool. It just helps you have that data on hand to be better able to advocate for yourself and detect your patterns. So you have symptoms in a very, like we have an emoji based tracking scale, which is super simple. A lot of people really appreciate that. And then showing as well as like a summary, which is specific to you and, the changes that are happening or what are the trends. So you can correlate between your, even like a journal log that you make on our app as well as the symptoms, like what's going on. And then there is also a very interesting aspect, which is the AI companion. Now, this is not a doctor. I just want to clarify that because we don't see it as replacing any existing like professionals, but rather supplementing that help or offering support in a different way. So when speaking to women, like when I was, conducting interviews and trying to understand what problems they're going through, a lot of people mention like not knowing when to seek help or just hesitating a lot. And then also there is in a lot of cases or by a lot of doctors, there can be judgment that comes along and or as you said, like even in the medical system, they might not know what something like they might not even know of the term PMDD. Like it's a lesser known condition for sure. And it falls between this gap, right? Of it's associated with your menstrual cycle, but it's affecting your brain or your mental health. So it's a hormone related mood disorder, or some people even call it a neuroendocrine condition. So whenever there's a gap between like what people are trained to help, and then when something is like sort of at the intersection of two or three different disciplines, there's always like it's tougher to get that help that you need. Plus, in general, with women's health, there's, even women who have PCOS are using HealCycle because we do have some content around that also. But with PCOS, a lot of people have told me that they were just told, okay, like lose weight and then come back. Or, it's just this blanket advice given to you with not much information on how to actually do it. And it's not always easy to just lose weight because that, like specifically what your body is going through makes it harder to do that. So there's a lot of hesitance, there's a lot of judgment and stigma here as well. And so just having like an emotionally supportive companion where you can ask questions and know that the answer you're getting is you can basically trust that answer. You're not Googling it and getting like 20 different sources that you have to dig through. And then you can get emotional support, including not just general statements, but actual like small activities or a breathing exercise or something else that you can do to calm yourself down in the moment. So things like that. So our AI companion is designed to integrate your information and also provide that sort of initial level of support and companionship. So I think in that way, in thinking through these features and developing that and the tech side, a lot of these different parts of my background fit together really well.
Okay, that was super insightful. And going back, I would like to say that, like, for anyone who's interested in checking out your TED Talk, I will leave the link in the description and in the show notes as well. Like, this is so cool that you're working on this, and I like that your work also intersects with like topics around PCOS, and then giving women like just beyond like this is what you can do, but you're presenting them with a way to like track over time and have data that they can actually present to a doctor and be like, this is not just me saying it, I have the data to back what I'm saying. And yeah, it's a better, more data driven approach, which is super cool. Okay, so what was like the moment or experience that first made you realize that there's a need for HealCycle?
Right. I think probably it was a series of experiences over the years, but I think the trigger point was definitely learning about this intersection of how not just like even as an activist in this space, we were so centered around those around periods per se, but there is a whole cycle, and that there are other phases that are important to pay attention to. And a lot of our this is actually pretty interesting, but men run on a 24-hour cycle, but women's bodies run on this 28 to 45-day hormonal cycle. And so our energy levels, the way we need to eat or move, and our mental health are all sort of attached to these different phases. So even things like cravings or certain nutritional needs and how you adjust those kind of vary as for where you're at. And then obviously this interconnection between hormonal and mental health. So specifically, there was this one conversation I had with a professor of psychiatry who told me about PMDD in detail. And then she also mentioned how this is one phase, right? And for HealCycle also, this is our starting point. But there are so many other ways in which our hormonal health does affect other parts of our well-being. And when we are going through menopause, for instance, women are at really high risk of falling into a mood disorder like depression or even cognitive changes that are happening. So it's not just the menstrual cycle and the way it's like your period coming to an end, but all these other aspects of your health, especially mental health, that are being affected. That was, I think, that realization that, oh my God, even being in this space and talking about this, we don't really step beyond the basic level of literacy or just, okay, these are the different types of products and period products, or it's so centered around that how it affects the rest of our health, especially, and for me, like, especially our mental health is totally ignored. That was something I wanted to change with HealCycle.
All right, that's really cool. And I think I see some similarities with a previous episode I did with Alicia. She has psycho positivity, and it's something also along the lines of like understanding not just your period, but like your overall cycle. But her case is more like for men in the workplace and understanding how women can be adapting their cycle towards like work productivity and stuff. So I love it that like more women are working on this space. I'm also working in this space as well, alongside like optimizing productivity along your cycle and not just tracking your period, but also understanding how the whole thing works. So this is really exciting. This is really exciting stuff. So let's talk a bit more about your AI bot, Tara. So how, like basically there's all these conversations about like AI ethics and ethical AI, especially when you're coming from a healthcare perspective. Like how do you factor in all this, like build trust with your users to understand like, okay, Tara is a tool that's for you and it's not going to be like sending your data to external parties or something. Like, how do you build that trust and how do you adapt like Tara to be able to answer the questions that women have?
Yes, absolutely. So I think that's why I mentioned right off the bat that we don't call Tara like an AI doctor or AI therapist or anything like that, because I think that distinction definitely needs to be maintained. There are a lot of products that are aiming to be, AI therapists, and I don't think like a human psychologist or doctor is ever going to be replaced entirely, right? It's only that 24/7, you can't necessarily have that in the moment support or just, someone to listen to you that you might need. And this can be a supplement uh, like that. So, in terms of data privacy, yes, that's extremely important. So, we have standard encryption of all data, which means, when it's in transit, when it's at rest at our servers, so everything is encrypted. Plus, for women who are extremely conscious of their privacy and don't want that level of personalization either, they can opt into end-to-end encryption. So we are one of the, I think there's maybe one or two more apps in this women's health space or menstrual health space. One that offer this end-to-end encryption essentially means that only the end user has access to their data to even decrypt it. So no one on the back end can ever access it. It does come with certain connotations sometimes that if you forget your encryption key or something like that, or then you kind of lose access to it. So it does have a certain some trade-offs that we are navigating, but we do offer that option of end-to-end encryption for the utmost, the highest level of privacy. And of course, we are not, like, part of our policy is like we are not going to sell this to advertisers or share it with third parties against end users' consent. And yeah, so I think all of those points are incredibly important. In terms of personalization, we are still improving our tech every single day, but it learns from previous chats. So it has some amount of memory to help contextualize its responses. Like Tara, I'm calling it right now. Even though we have given it a whole character and personality and we made sure that we're not giving it, one of our considerations was, did we make this like a big sister or like, human form? But then we decided against that and very clearly kept it as it's a jellyfish, right? It's a jellyfish called Tara. So you know that it's a fictional character. You are not calling it your like a big sister or like a motherly figure or anything like that, just to make sure that people do form emotional attachment sometimes when they're conversing, but keeping that in mind that it's like a fictional character and it's an animal, and so you perceive it that way. So those are all the aspects that we have taken into account.
That's very interesting. I love that you like right from the get-go, you're emphasizing like, listen, this is not your doctor. This is just a support tool. And you kind of like that you call it it. It's not the personification. What's when you're making an inanimate object sound like a
Personification. Yeah. So that's why I typically, when we are using Tara on social media or something, we call it she, or or Tara talks in with a pronoun. But right now, is just calling it to keep it neutral.
I think that's very important because I was literally listening to a video essay yesterday, and the person was okay. I wasn't listening to a video essay. That's fun. I was watching a video essay yesterday, and the person was talking about how people are forming bonds with AI chatbots and marrying them and going on dates with them and ruining their personal relationships. And seeing it from that perspective, then bringing it towards this healthcare perspective, I think this what you're doing is very important because it's very easy for people to maybe want to turn Tara into a therapist or something. So I like that you're really this out there, listen, this is for support. It's not to replace your therapist or your doctor or your gyno or anything. That's really cool. And I also appreciate the part where you discussed about the encryption part, because I'm also building something that's also similar to what you're building as well in a way, but it's kind of different. But I love that you're building this encryption part because it's also something that's important to me, because I didn't understand the importance of data privacy until I started learning about AI ethics and everything else and AI governance and all these other things. And then I realized oh, I've been sharing my data with this app for a long time and they got breached. I think this happened 2019 and I wasn't even bothered about it because I didn't understand what that breach meant. And then fast forward to now, I'm
right.
This is a very serious issue. And from the get-go, I made it clear that we need the data to be encrypted. Period. We're not sharing it to anybody. I love that your app also factors in this, and it's super important. Okay. So why do you think there isn't that many conversations around PMDD. Why do you think like maybe women may have a delayed diagnosis around this? Like, what are your thoughts?
I think while both menstrual health and mental health are stigmatized topics in all societies, maybe more in certain parts of the world and less in like Western countries, maybe the conversation has been happening for a while. But I still think these are topics that are not very openly spoken about. And so PMDD falls into both of those. But then also maybe just a lack of awareness in general with DSM-5 is the handbook that psychologists or psychiatrists use to diagnose it's essentially the list of all mood disorders or mental health disorders and what their diagnostic criteria is and everything. So there was a struggle to even get it recognized and get it added because and it was added, I think, if I'm not wrong, in 2013. So not that long back, right? Before that, it was maybe in the appendix or something. So there's a whole history behind this where some feminist activists, for their own, like they had some arguments which are, some people, you can see the reasoning from their side also. But essentially, it was that this might be pathologizing something which is just PMS or not that extreme or something like that. Basically, their argument was also a form of think about how in the older days, not that old also, but not that long back, a lot of women were called hysterical. Or even now, there is data showing that when women go with their legitimate health problems, sometimes these are attributed to psychological causes. So I think they were afraid that creating such a diagnosis would mean they're more likely for some physical problem to be attributed to a psychological cause and being told that, oh, like women are hysterical because they menstruate. So things like that. So I think in that context of that history, it is important to keep in mind that, yes, we don't want to pathologize menstruation in any way or say that all women are, there's all of these like pop culture references of like, oh, she must be PMSing or it's that time of the month or like all of these negative connotations about PMS. So we do have to keep in mind that for a lot of women, it is manageable, but we still benefit from tools like cycle syncing and other things which are out there and also are a part of like HealCycle. And then for a minority of women, which is a significant minority that shouldn't be ignored, PMS can be moderate to severe or really bad, and then they fall under the category of PMDD. So even if it is 3 to 8% of all women, that is a lot of women if you think about the numbers, right? This subset does need our support, does need help, and we should be talking about this, but not in a way that says that everyone experiences it or that, it makes women go crazy and like it applies to all, not to stigmatize periods all over again by having this notion of like it makes women go crazy or hysterical. So I think that was part of the history behind even preventing PMDD from being properly recognized. So we have this complex thing to like tension. But I think recognizing a proper medical issue that women are going through is necessary. And that doesn't mean that we go on and like adopt our previous attitudes about calling women hysterical.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes a whole lot of sense. Yeah. And I also appreciate that you mentioned like the parts about the memes and everything. And then we don't want to like have this backfire because we want to create awareness on so women can better be in sync with their bodies, but also we don't want it to look like, oh, every woman, we don't want to overgeneralize as well, because I think like for every woman.
Exactly.
Okay. So let's talk a bit more about HealCycle, as we already have. Okay, so your app also includes mood journaling and CBT and affirmations. So why was it important to include this emotional and psychological tools and not just symptom tracking, but also including this as well?
Yes, absolutely. I think just to give more value, right? Like, sure, they are tracking their data, and we analyze it for them, but can we provide more support? Like if someone is experiencing a certain emotion or feeling or, feeling anxiety, anxious on a day or are really down or they're going through some fatigue and emotional trauma or anything like that, can we offer that in the moment support that can make them feel a little bit better or just more in control? So I think those aspects of having kind meditations, and we are also adding some guided meditations soon, and affirmations. Affirmations are actually something that some people really loved and wanted, and also are asking that to be an even bigger part of the app. So right now we have some in our health hub section, and every day when you open the app, you are like, there is a short affirmation depending on which phase you're in. So those things, and then people are also requesting that, okay, can I customize this? So I think there has been a lot of it has come up, I think, culturally and on social media. And some people see it as a sort of like woo woo type of thing. But then there's also real science to support that if we speak and think positive words, that does affect our mental state and our physical state in a positive manner. So to move towards that direction, plus incorporating well-researched tools, so that's cognitive behavioral therapy. And there are also a couple of tools that we have from DBT, which is a subset of CBT. So DBT is dialectical behavioral therapy, and it's more focused on emotions, whereas cognitive behavioral therapy is more focused on reframing negative thought patterns or thought patterns in general. So sometimes if the thought itself directly can't be addressed, you can still deal with the emotions and relationships and those aspects. So that's where DBT and exercises or tools from there come in handy. There are different methodologies that we have, adopted from, and will continue to grow the content base. But it was important to also have, real content and supportive tools. And there's a whole health hub section on the app because of that.
Okay, that's really awesome. And I love that while listening to you, I can see your cognitive science really shining through in the way you explain the concept, which is so awesome. Hey, this is very
Thank
impressive.
you.
You're welcome. And so you've run like public awareness campaigns and spoken openly about menstrual mental health, covering PMDD, PMS. So what has surprised you the most about like presenting these ideas to the public? Like, have you had any backlash, or are people like super open to discussing this? Like, what has been your experience basically?
I think people have been open to understanding it. And interestingly, I think a lot of other women have come up sharing that either they think that they have like bad PMS, or they might have PMDD, but then also just requests for, okay, like I went through something similar when I was going through, like there was one woman, she was actually a faculty member at one of the workshops that we were giving, who shared her journey through IVF and fertility treatments. And then because you are taking these injections and everything, there are hormonal changes happening in your body that also affect both your emotional and mental health, plus that burden of, you're trying to get pregnant. And as I discussed previously, perimenopause. And so we have received more and more requests for, okay, like not only from women who have PMS and PMDD, but also in other life phases. And so that has been both really educational, also just learning more deeply about other concerns, and then figuring out, okay, like how do we gradually but meaningfully expand support to these other areas that women need help with. So I think that has been a major part of this. Another one I think has also just been this feeling of gratitude in some ways, of sparking this conversation and even understanding this link between menstrual health and how it affects your physical and mental health. Even physical, when I say that, it's because we do address some aspects of like nutrition and exercise, which, as you've also spoken to other women and are working on something yourself, like if we adjust like how we eat and how we move throughout the cycle, that can really help with not just productivity, but also just feeling better, having better energy, moods, and relationships and all of that. Yeah. So I think that part of understanding the different phases of the cycle, understanding the impact and mood and energy, that has really been something a lot of people appreciated, because it's not as common a conversation. It's just starting to pick up, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It's a lot of these conversations are just starting to pick up, and it's really cool that we're having them, and also having someone like you at the forefront spreading this information, which is really exciting to see. So, for somebody who is listening and is struggling with PMS or PMDD, what's one thing that you wish they knew? Let's say they haven't been diagnosed, or okay, let me just frame the question like this: like, what do you think more women should know about PMS and PMDD that they typically wouldn't?
Right. I think the main thing I would say is you're not alone, even if it
Mm-hmm.
might feel like you are. There are so many others who are going through it. If you feel like, okay, like compared to my friends, why am I only having such bad PMS and like what's wrong with me? You're not the only one, right? So that's the first thing. The second one is that there are different types of help and solutions available. So for some women, they are like birth control can help, and usually it is the first thing that a lot of gynecologists prescribe when it comes to PCOS, when it comes to PMDD, also birth control. Or if you go to a psychiatrist, they might suggest SSRIs or antidepressants. Essentially, some women benefit from those, some do not, and some don't even want to take medication. So being mindful of that. I think it is also important to say that there are different types of solutions out there. Like there are other methods that you can try, like nutritional ones and therapeutic techniques, which we just discussed, like CBT, DBT, and so on. So there are other ways to manage or even address root symptoms, rather than if you are someone for whom medication hasn't worked, or you don't want to go on birth control because it has other side effects. So I think that is also an extremely important point. And also one more point, like you might not want to go on birth control also because of cultural or family reasons. Like there are women, I can speak from my own background also, like from women in India and South Asian countries. I'm sure it's common in other similar cultures, often have this familial burden where both they might not want to go on contraception or their family might be against it. So keeping that in mind also, there could be other ways, and having that data and information at hand with a tracking tool like HealCycle, plus having other like not the knowledge of, okay, like that's why we've covered other topics of like nutritional methods and therapeutic techniques on the app, that there are multiple solutions that you can try.
Okay, that's really awesome. And I like that, like your product, for example, is giving women like a more data-driven and research-driven approach towards approaching and showing them that it doesn't have to be like this one thing. There are other things that you can try and see what works best for you. Because I think I think like in general, like the world is moving towards more of a personalized approach to medicine. So I love that this is happening as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So we're heading towards the end of the podcast. So I have a few final questions for you. So it's really cool speaking with you because you've done a lot of exciting work. You've finished from Princeton, you've done a TED Talk, you're launching your app, or you've already launched the app. And so, like, what's next for you and for HealCycle?
Thank you so much. That's really kind of you. I think, yes, this is just the beginning of the journey, and we're constantly learning from our users, both adding more features that have been requested on the app itself, but also we have currently a pilot study with Athena DAO, which is a decentralized women's R&D ecosystem that is supporting us with this pilot. So if you want to go and enroll in that, you can do so. The link is there on our LinkedIn page. So if you just put in LinkedIn, HealCycle, it'll come up. And then you'll see one of our recent posts has all of the details about the study. And I can also share it with you if you want to link it in the podcast itself. So there is that. Plus, we are through that, and then other conversations that we're having with our users, we are thinking about, okay, like what comes next in terms of you're really excited about the potential for wearables, for example, and other types of tools that are coming up. So if that is something of interest, like that is a direction that we are actively exploring, of pairing our app with a physical device or similar like therapeutic tool. So I'm really excited about that. I know hardware and all of the challenges that come with that can be complicated to navigate. So I'd say we're still in the early days. But I think it's really exciting what is possible in terms of like offering data driven support tailored to the female body. But then also there are other types of therapeutic devices that can help with symptom like reduction and release. So that might be what's coming up next for HealCycle.
All right. That's really exciting. I love that you mentioned wearables because wearables are so cool. Like I don't know if you've seen them. Like I love how like wearables are evolving beyond like watches and stuff. And now we're having like earrings and necklaces
Exactly.
and bracelets. And it's like this is such
Yeah,
exciting stuff. I wonder what your wearable is going to look like. Maybe who
absolutely.
knows who knows what it's going to be.
Yes.
Okay, a few final questions. So I recently introduced this, but I don't think I can say recently anymore because it's been a while since I introduced it, like 4 podcast episodes ago. So what would you tell 15-year-old you if you could?
Right. I think that's a hard question. I would tell her that it's okay to take it easy and that she'll everything that she's doing will somehow, all the dots will connect and
Mhm.
to enjoy and relax sometimes.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then the final question. So for someone who wants to learn more about HealCycle, who wants to follow you and learn more about what you're up to these days, like what's the best way to reach you and learn more about your company?
Sure. So you can follow us on Instagram or TikTok at HealCycle. That is the handle. And I also have a personal, if you're on TikTok, my handle is Ananya_HealCycle. We also have our website, which has an amazing blog with over 150 articles now. So that's called HealCycle.com. And to visit the blog, you can just add a backslash and blog after that. So you can go there. And the website also has the link to our app. The app is on both iOS and Android. So if you want to directly check that out, I would encourage you to do so. That is also called HealCycle on your Google Play Store or on iOS. So it's on both platforms, whichever phone you're using, you should be able to find it. It might not be, depending on the time by which the podcast comes live, we are also soon about to be live in European countries. So currently on the UK or Germany or like other app stores, it might not show up, but in like about 2 weeks from now, it should be up.
All right. Awesome. That's fantastic. I will leave all the links to this in the show notes and in the description. Thank you so much, Ananya. It's been really, really awesome learning so much about PMS, PMDD, and what you're building at HealCycle and also what you're up to. So this is really cool. And thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely talking to you, and I hope this people that are watching learn something and take that message away and share it with more people. Maybe you yourself are not someone who goes through PMS, PMDD, or any menstrual issue, but you know someone in your circle who does, who could benefit from this. So definitely share it forward.
Hi again. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Blush and Bloom. I'm so glad you joined me for this conversation. If you found it helpful, please share this episode with a friend or someone who might need it. Let's keep talking about women's health and working towards better outcomes for all of us. You can find more episodes and resources at www.asada.tech and check out our app at www.asada.health. And you can follow us for more updates on Instagram at asada.tech. Until next time, I'll see you in the next episode. Take care and bye-bye.